Hey everyone. Thank you so much for being with us and for the beautiful offering. We're going to begin centering justice today a little bit differently than we have in the past, which is to invite, in light of the tragedy at MSU this week, we want to invite um, a speaking of the names of those young people who were senselessly murdered, um, and also to just honor and consider their family and the MSU family, which has just such a vast, has so many vast tentacles into our community. So I'm going to offer the name of Brian Fraser, Alexandria Verner, Ariel Anderson, and there were 5 other students who were hurt, some with life-threatening injuries. So I just want to take a brief pause. I would ask that you just focus your energies and your attention on centering both them, their lives that were cut short, the promise and potential that they each held, and the ways in which our own fates were tied to theirs. I was reading a little bit about each of them, and Brian was exercising leadership in his fraternity, and Alex was so loved and generous in her connections. I'm still getting to know Alexandria's family, just at the end, Ariel's family kind of held back on sharing her name, so I'm just getting a chance to read about Ariel. But as I looked at her picture today, she was so beautiful and has such a vibrant smile. The man who murdered them and also unalived himself had lost his mother in 2020. And reports are that his mental health declined significantly over the last 2 years. His father said that he would spend hours in his bedroom. And I was thinking about the interconnections of these systems, that the ways in which mental health support is limited and has been made anemic over the last 30 years in the decline of support for mental health services. I was thinking about the way that since Sandy Hook, to me, y'all, we have made our children political pawns. And I was thinking also about, I don't know who said this quote, but it's that oppression seeks to exhaust us. Its purpose is to render us feeling exhausted, which also then can make you feel helpless. I felt a little bit of that. I felt it every time there are these mass shootings. And as I was meditating on that, I came across a quote from Audre Lorde, the poet. She said, "We can learn to work and speak when we are afraid, in the same way we have learned to work and speak when we are tired." And so I just want to hold on to that for myself, that when oppression tries to exhaust me, when I feel overwhelmed, that I have evidence of times when I've worked through fear and worked through exhaustion and worked through being tired. And I want to invite each of us to find a small and manageable way, whether to play an active part in protecting our children and our communities. So for me, that has been organizing with a care-based safety design team to create an unarmed response program in Washtenaw County. And I'm just doing the best I can there. There are so many other people and hands that are a part of that. That was born out of an advocacy group called the Coalition for Re-envisioning Our Safety. The city of Ann Arbor passed a resolution to fund an unarmed response program. I think we can keep each other safe, and I don't think we have to rely on cops to do that. And I have evidence in my own life of times where I was kept safe by neighbors, friends, and family, and where I have been able to keep folks safe. So that's where I'm at coming into this space. And those babies deserve our action, our attention, and for us to speak their name. And thank you, Eileen, for putting their name in the chat. And it is Black History Month, and I'm thinking about Coretta Scott King and Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King and others who have contributed to this idea, this vision, this aspiration for the beloved community. And every time I say those two words, I feel like my heart open and expand a bit. And so I want to thank those of you who are here today, many of you who I know, but who I also see contributing to that beloved community. And so we have evidence as a collective that we can create that too. And Eileen Ho, who's with us today, that you're going to hear a little bit more about, she has been this quiet, powerful contributor to the beloved community of centering justice. And we were thinking today about shared leadership. I was reminded of a time when she drummed for us, and you heard a bit of a song she recommended as we were opening up. And I'd written this poem called "I Wonder If They Knew," where one of the lines I talk about how oppression cannot snatch the drumbeat of Africa that was planted in my soul. And so, Eileen, thank you for your creative offerings and for being with us. I'm so delighted for the conversation today, and I know that we can hold hurt and hope at the same time today. So thank you, everyone. Thanks for listening. Hamida, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks so much for opening our time together, Yodit, and thank you everyone for reflecting on the ways in which we've lost some young people within our community, and we're still holding what it means to remember them and honor them, and also think about the ways in which we can honor them through our actions and our movements. Just a really thoughtful space. I also realized I didn't say who I was. I might be helpful. My name is Hamida Bagarathi, pronoun she, her, hers. Really excited to have Carly alongside with us, who always is at CJ Centering Justice helping us out. Really excited to have Eileen with us, and thank you so much, Yodit. In terms of where I join you from, my apartment, welcome to my house. From Ypsilanti and the unceded and occupied lands of the 3 council fires of Michigan, the Sauk, the Fox, and the Wyandotte, and the land in which contemporary Indigenous folks live and thrive and contribute to our collective society. And in our past episodes, we've talked about shared governance. What does autonomy look like for us? What does it feel like for us? And we spent some time flitting around between like theory and practice of like sociocracy and different shared models of leadership. And as we were thinking about, so what's on tap or deck for our next episode? And just kind of go back to what Yodit had shared. there were times when Eileen would drop in the chat, like, yeah, that resource, I'm reading it right now. Or, I'm late to this thing because I was looking at, sort of like regenerative economies talk. And so, as we were thinking about groups or folks to connect with, we were like, there's one of our own CJ, participants, community members who was doing the thing. She is here and she is here for it. And I mean, when we talked about like really focusing on nurturing the power within to move within ourselves and alongside others and not like over or to or for, but to really to uplift community voices and think about who is impacted and how to create space, like force aside kind of like structures and create new space for folks. Like Eileen, you came to mind. So for this session, we're thinking about how do we share leadership to realize our visions of a just and thriving society. And so we are so lucky to have Eileen Ho with us. She is currently part of our Champions for Change cohort as a non-Black POC in solidarity. And Eileen is a taiko drum artist, educator, and organizer at the Great Lakes Taiko Center, based in Southeast Michigan, with co-director and live partner Larry Ahn. Eileen shows up in her communities to reimagine, share, and activate the cultural power of taiko arts, which enables us not only to resist and disrupt through practices rooted in ancestral wisdom, but also invites us to build and dream through collective play, empowering us to express who we are and celebrate the world we want to live in together, in peace with abundance of love and joy. And so today we're going to spend some time thinking about how can we shift towards a more regenerative, collective, and democratic way of working. And Eileen from the Great Lakes Taiko Center, she is doing some real-time work in figuring this out and figuring out ways to transition from some more of the traditional structures in which power wasn't as shared to try out new things, to learn, to unlearn, to reimagine what Great Lakes Taiko Center looks like in terms of leadership. So super excited to have you with us, Eileen.
Can I just uplift like what I'm so anticipating here is, and I think you said it, but I want to be really explicit, is like holding this tension between theory and practice. And that's that was what I feel like Eileen brought, is like the practice that hopefully each of us can glean from. And we acknowledge that practice is dynamic, right? So you're learning as you go, but doing some beautiful work. Good morning, Eileen. Or good afternoon.
Thank you. Yes, we are here. Yes, thank you so much. I'm so happy to be coming into the space. And for me, it is, I'm just grateful to be able to connect with centering justice through new and we are here because of the space and the care that is opened up for us. And thank you, Yodit, for bringing into this space our acknowledgement and our grief and our need for action, and names and people that we are caring about that are connected to our lives. And I'm excited to be here in conversation with you all. For me, it's like I'm joining a big drum circle. We're all here in our Zoom circle. And in the center of our space that we are holding together is justice. Whatever that means for you, what it means for you right now in this moment. And I come in the act of practicing, not perfecting, and doing by being. So thank you for this chance to connect.
We're so delighted to have you with us, Eileen. So Some of you may know who have attended Centering Justice before. We often start out asking folks, our speaker collaborator, to share. We want folks to bring their whole selves with us. And we're lucky to be able to be fortunate to hear about whole selves. So Eileen, could you share a little bit about the identities that you're drawing from and bringing into the space as you join us today?
Sure, thank you. Thank you. Thank you for the ask. Thank you for asking who I am, because in my telling, I learn more about who I am myself. So my name is Eileen S. Ho. S stands for Sheila, which I don't often say. And He Eiling is my Chinese given name that my parents gave me. I like to translate it as "what a loveling." And I use the pronouns she, her, hers. So yes, I am a daughter and oldest sibling of a sister and a brother. And my parents, and I was raised here in the Huron Valley area. I'm coming to you right now from the north side of Ann Arbor, where I live, with my life partner, Larry An, who I met in high school at Huron High. So I'm also a long time, I have been schooled in along this river from Ann Arbor in elementary, Allen School, and our family moved to Ypsilanti. So I was at Willow Run for a while, Cheney Elementary, Edmondson Junior High at that time, and back to Ann Arbor, Slauson, and Huron High School, class of '83. So yes, I come with my 55 plus 1 year old body. I wasn't keeping track, so I was like, oh wait, 55 is a very cool year, so I'm gonna keep that in mind. And for a while, Larry and I moved and lived over in the Twin Cities in Minnesota, where with our young family we homeschooled, and I also came to find myself immersing myself in the act of the arts. Whereas I was schooled in at the University of Michigan, I majored in geology and then earth sciences and environmental sciences. But as I was in contact with, in community with the vibrant arts community in the Twin Cities, I came to join circles of, a women's choir, the Earth Tones, and Javanese gamelan and dance, which connects to my parents who were ethnic Chinese in Bandung, Indonesia, before they came to the United States in the 60s. So, and taiko drum. We took our kids to a school show of Japanese taiko drumming, performed at that time by a group called Mudaiko, and now they exist as Taiko Arts Midwest. But that is where I first picked up my first pair of bocce sticks and started learning and drumming and becoming part of that community of artists and players and creators. So now I have we returned almost in 2009, so over 10 years ago, back here, back to home, and I'm reconnecting with my communities here, mostly through my work and play at the Great Lakes Taiko Center, which is an arts organization, a collective of performing groups and performing member artists, and members, students learning through play and yeah, and that is where a lot of my ways of being right now are through taiko. So taiko is an art form. It's a performing art form. Actually, only more recently, like in the 60s and 50s, 60s, 70s, an art form from Japan that is exists as a group ensemble type of playing. But before that, taiko drumming is rooted in traditional Japanese music and but also cultural methods of communication and if we take it even more back and the drum as Yodit mentioned, it exists. The rhythms of life are beat out on these drums by people from hundred thousands of years ago, right? And so taiko is also in the history that we receive it, rooted in ancient ancestral wisdom, and the ways that we have received it. It comes from it had been created through indigenous peoples whose wisdom and being is carried through, and that is important for us to feel. So here we are now. All these things happening for me in terms of what it means to be here, working and playing through taiko for me, with you all, with the people I'm connected to.
Thank you for sharing that. I love that we invite people to bring their full selves. It just adds so much depth. Even just hearing the pauses in your voice as you bring yourself into space, I'm finding so grounding to my nervous system, and the thoughtfulness and the breadth of connection to your personhood and your humanity that your work has, and the fact that it's rooted in art and play. I was in conversation with someone this week. We were talking about sabbaticals, and while those are great and they offer you some time for respite or to step away, they're temporal. And so my sort of retort was, how do we institutionalize, or inculcate rest and wellness and make it a part of how we experience our work, our life. And I think one of the areas that I want to grow is around this idea of play, Eileen. And again, like normalizing play. I feel like we've relegated that to like what kids do. And as we become adult, we play less. One of the questions that I love to ask in this space is about, transformation. Like, what is your sort of story of transformation? And I recognize that boxes you into a story, and you may have many stories of transformation as we do, but the Center of Justice is a space for us to radically imagine the futures we long for and to bring our witnessing of how we've been transformed into space and sharing those. So I'd love to hear if you have a moment that, in fact, I know you do because we talked about that.
Let's see. Okay, yeah, we have.
What is your story
We
of
have the moment.
transformation, Eileen?
Yes, transformation. So, thank you again for asking. Again, I find myself in this circle, right? And what you just said, Yodit, about making space, pausing. That is a big part of how I've been thinking about, but also feeling that my transformation, my change, my as I am on this roadmap to liberation, which is a phrase I'm taking from my study with transformational change with Rev Angel Kyoto Williams at Radical Dharma, which I came to. So there are all these circles. So in my Taiko community, when the pandemic, the multiple pandemics, the pandemic of COVID, and our health, ecosystem health, the pandemic of social injustice, and climate change, and all these things amplified in the last few years. That is really where this need for transformation came to me, right? And this is where I've been connecting in circles of people who have been navigating what they're feeling, making space, trying not to recede, contract, because of all the things that are happening, because of the systems we're in. So, wow, there's a lot of things. Right? So I'm just going to take it as we're in the circle. I'm going to be circling back to a lot of things. But yes, so the space that this is happening for me is a space that I feel this is my practice, is to be able to ground myself in who I am, and continue to discover that, continue to return to that, and also make space for what is needed, so that we can allow for joy, we can allow for rest, for grief, and this is all also for connection. And this, I'm bringing this in from my most recent the studying of the solidarity economy principles, of which one is liberation culture, right? This is what is our culture? What are our ways of being with each other? But for me, it's really what is it that I am not just doing, but what is it that I am being here, right? So yes, my story that I bring to you now is really a circular story. It starts with how I'm centering Taiko as the thing I'm doing, and the thing that brings me joy, and allows me to work and play with others in a way that that allows for imagination, allows for working from a positive and abundance perspective, and also building community. So transformation is of how, so going back to my work at the Great Lakes Taiko Center, which I had been part of since its founding by Brian Soul and Mayumi Soul, who are Southeast Michigan natives. Well, Brian Soul is, and they went, excuse me, they went to Japan to learn more about Japanese taiko drumming and train, and returned to Michigan in 2009, right when my family was returning to Michigan, to create the Great Lakes Taiko Center, as and they did that. And it's amazing in the 10 years from that start, how much happened through taiko, how much we were able to share the joy of taiko, which is our that is our organization's mission. That is the vision that Brian had. Is, we were coming into the state during, at that time, there were economic crises going on too, and he was like, taiko is such a important part of my life, and he really saw that this was something that needed to be shared. And this is on this, in this spirit, is something that I hold also, and that is, we are who we need. Yodi, and your calling earlier, and as we continue our conversation, this is something that I hold. And so it's super important for me to really get grounded in coming back to, again, ourselves. Who are we? What do we need? Because we have what we need. And that, I think, is in centering, for me, centering the love that is there. So anyways, so the Great Lakes Taiko Center is also a community or communities that have been growing, but within the context of all the struggles that come from being in the institutions that we are impacted by, right? So so there was a struggle of like, well, how do we pay the bills, right? How do we set up our fees for classes, and and then so our work was largely through two avenues. One is through providing learning communities, so in the form of classes where people would come and take taiko classes from us, and the other is through performance. So we had initially one and then two performing groups that would share taiko through taiko performances throughout the community, mostly in Southeast Michigan, but also beyond. But there was a struggle of how do we set our performance fees? What is fair compensation for the members who are playing as artists, individual artists? And then eventually, this is a lot of work to manage, to administer an organization which was set up as a business, specifically an LLC, and how can you, so all the struggle of how can an artist, how can an owner of an arts center make a living wage, and like, yeah, you could get, that wasn't happening, right? Because there are all these things. So because of all these pressures, all these situations, I did find myself and my partner, and we were active members in the arts with the art center, in a position, a privileged position, to help transition the Tycho Center, into, at the time we were thinking like, oh, we will transition to becoming the new owners of this business, right? um and at the same time, so this is all happening very acutely, mostly like right before the pandemic and through the pandemic, right? We're trying to figure out, okay, what can happen here. So a lot of things needed to be to happen in my perspective, and that was like, how can we how can we take this existence, this way of being, this playing taiko with each other, and make it accessible, make it move beyond these struggles that are constantly really limiting our ability to be free with this, what we have.
Well,
And that's
Eileen,
where,
I wanna
yeah,
slightly jump in a little bit because I think one piece is where, if I understand correctly, feel free to, kind of check me if I don't. Like you started out as a member and you were really participatory in the Great Lakes Taiko Center. And Brian had sort of started it as an organization, LLC, as you've mentioned. And then you and your life partner, Larry, had a chance to think about the futuring when Brian sort of wanted to step away from the work. And so, I have sensed that you were sort of at this pivotal point where you're learning about all these like different concepts about like shared leadership and
yes. Mhm.
there might have been practices that are as traditional business practices of like what fees might look like, what models might look like. And my sense is that you were evolving the way you think about all of that in that transition and sort of thinking about how to not only just replicate what might have been sort of like the startup of Great Lakes, but also to think about what Great Lakes could be, like who it could be for. And I'd love to share, if you could share a little bit about like how
Yes.
the thought processes were evolving and unfolding and furling,
Yeah.
unfurling, or changing, because I think that was really
Yes,
cool.
thank you. Yeah. So like the immediate, okay, like I said, the pandemic pretty much amplified a lot of things for us. Put a lens on like, wait, what, how can we do this? Or how have we been doing it? And it also made us think about how we feel about how we do things, right? A lot of us were like, oh, I want to. What happened, for example, at the Taiko Center, and I'm going to take this point because I think it's a really pivotal point um, for a lot of us, but specifically for me in thinking about what can I do? Like, what do we want to do? And that is when in March, mid-March of 2020, all the realizations came in, and we're like, okay, I guess we need to shut down. And so we at the time we had like classes going on most of the days of the week, and so that was stopped. At the studio where we were based, which was Novi, um, and so that really like was like, okay, uh, it took a little while, but not too long, because because I was able to stay connected with other people in the Taiko community, other people in our community, in my community circles, who are trying to think, what can we do? How can we stay connected, right? While we're locked down, or like, do we need to just stop doing everything? And for one, we gave ourselves a pause. Like, yeah, it's okay. Let's stop doing everything. But then in as a yeah. So basically, you could guess. We moved online. It was one mode. And that was about like, how can we still, what are the ways we can still connect? What are the ways that and it was also asking like, what do we want to do, right? So
Yeah.
everyone is like, oh, I want to keep playing. I want to keep playing with people,
Our human need to belong, right?
yeah,
And to be connected, like,
right,
yeah, my mother I think she used to say, necessity is the mother of invention,
exactly.
You just you all had to adapt, right? It forced us
Mm-hmm,
to adapt.
mm-hmm.
I wonder too, tell me if I'm projecting, but I've said this on CJ a number of times. I'll never forget an article that came out, America is a Sham. And in it, it was illuminating how suddenly we had these moratoriums on rent and utilities, and you could fly affordably. You could take hand sanitizer on the plane, more than 3 ounces or whatever the limits
Right,
are,
right.
right? It was
Mm-hmm.
like, for me at least, this period of time over the last few years has been traumatic and hard in many ways, but also has opened up, I think, some imaginations or some possibilities that I felt that I maybe previously felt more constrained. And it sounds like that was happening
Yeah,
for you all too. Like,
imaginations,
yeah,
reimaginations,
yeah, right.
but also open up that space of allowing us to be with our generosity.
Yeah, yeah,
So again,
Eileen,
back to that love, right?
I
yeah.
want to hear about this drum checkout program that you started. Like, I've been
Yes.
waiting to get to tell that story, because
So
that is the
yeah,
way where you were
so
like, we got this. I'll let you tell it. I'm excited to hear.
right. So sharing, we're talking about sharing, right? Sharing power. What is power? Knowledge is power. Resources is power. So we were um those of us who were able to stay connected, sitting at home, you know, um wanting to continue our practice of playing rhythms. And the before times, that meant going to the studio, taking the drum off the shelf, bringing our sticks in and playing, right, in this space, but not having that space, not having those drums. Those drums, where were those drums? They were eventually later that year, we had to move out of the space because of, rent. We couldn't pay rent for things sitting in a space by themselves. So the drums were like mostly at my house in the basement, in the TV room. But here we are. We are also in our individual locations where we are, and we're like, okay. At first, we were like, whatever you have, we can drum with, as long as we have our bodies here and we can connect, and you have the internet signal. That's another thing. um then let's drum. We, even in our regular practice, we drum on our bodies, right, with our hands. Teoji, we do the rhythms out. But at home, we can also grab a couple wooden spoons or whatever you have that look like sticks, roll up magazines, play on your pillow or your sofa or rolled up towel. But also it came across to us that, like, wait, we have drums. And this happened throughout the taiko community, realization that, like, why don't we bring the drums to the people? And so we started a program we call Taiko Share. Taiko is the name also for the drum. And so we distributed the taiko to people at home so that they could, play along or practice on their own. But yeah, so this idea of sharing resources also came through in our reimagining, in how we thought about how do people pay for how do people pay for participating in our activities. And what we really like, the idea of a solidarity economy is also surrounding, like, how can we empower the people to do what they need to do? How can we share resources so that how we live is in a regenerative, supported, sustainable way. So that meant, okay, we shifted. We had been thinking about this, but we shifted to a membership fee when we eventually were like, okay, let's get some redistributing of funds, right? And we instituted a membership program, Great Lakes Taiko Center membership program, which is based on a pay-as-you-can sliding scale, if you will. But the idea is that, people coming in, we want to support joining the drum circle in a way that is possible for every member. And what you get for where on the sliding scale, what your monthly membership fee option that you chose is the same for every member. And so this was about, for us, about access as much as a way of thinking, a new way of thinking for our financial budgeting. But
can we pause there for a
yes.
second, Eileen? Because I just want to connect some strands.
Yes.
So there's your own personal transformation around the drumming and the difference between sort of like the practice, the learning, etc., and the evolution of that into sort of leadership within that circle. And then there's this series of pandemics, as you say, that happen, that have a defining moment, not just for you personally, not just for the Taiko community, but also for the way you're thinking about, as you and your partner take over the quote unquote ownership of the center. There's this cacophony of experiences and dynamics that are happening, along with, as Hamida said, you're experiencing radical Dharma and the teachings there. You're picking up on these principles of solidarity economies and thinking in real time, how do I apply those things in how we think about the construction of this business? And I think for many of us, the pandemics revealed how technology and access and the like cut across some of the same lines or issues that Centering Justice is intended to talk about. It's Centering Justice, like you, exists because I saw the need to amplify our voices when our trauma responses were to go back to what we knew, right? To go back to, and what I perceived as kind of like a Hunger Games happening in the sector. So I really relate to how your own personal epiphanies and awakenings start to show up in how you're thinking about leadership and how to inculcate these ideas of solidarity into the business itself. And for me, at times, I've felt, at least over the last few years, like how we ran our business and how wanted to be in relationship with
Mm-hmm.
people in our work, we're in conflict with each other, right? And in large part
Yeah.
for what you said, because we're running a business within a capitalist construct,
Mm-hmm.
right? That
Mm-hmm.
valorizes, how much revenue do you have, or ties that revenue to what is your relationship with the client or the customer, right? And your ability to kind of meet them where they are. I really admire how you're deconstructing some of those beliefs. If I can, it's sort of a bit of a tangent, but I got a text this morning from someone who had offered these anti-capitalist affirmations, and a few of
Okay.
them, I think. So one, I'm allowed to spend my time creating things, even if they're not beautiful. Because, honey, I would
Yes.
love to drum, but I know it wouldn't sound good. There's no such thing as a quote unquote real job. All forms of work are real and valid.
Mm.
There's nothing that I need to accomplish to be worthy. I'm already worthy. I heard that from you.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not defined by what I produce. My worth cannot be measured by my paycheck, a job title, or a list of professional or academic achievements.
Mm-hmm.
I do not need to monetize my hobbies. It's enough time to spend time doing them. And finally, I will not
Right.
let society decide what success looks like. We get to define that for ourselves.
We get to decide that. Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So come on and talk to me then about, how do you start thinking about leadership, sharing leadership? How's what you're
Mhm.
learning through the solidarity economy, this idea, right, that none of us, this liberation culture is really none of us is free till we all are, right? So
Right.
I'm seeing you apply that and kind of how you're thinking about engaging with members, partners, et cetera. So tell us, like, give me the nitty gritty. How are you all reconstructing Tycho in that way?
Yes. Thank you. Thank you. And yeah, you touched. Thank you for swirling in all those things, Yodi. Because I just need to say that this is happening. How I've come to all these fields, how I've come to think like I need to, I need to do this. I can do this, is through, again, through the connections, through centering justice circle, which is a collective care circle, and that is where, again, that is where I'm feeling empowered. That is how I'm feeling enabled and given the gift of being able to yeah, see how at least start to see how this is a way that I can walk, right? So then I felt a very deep need to, how can I connect with my community? How can I bring these things that I'm in touch with in these circles, on these circles, these virtual deep circles, right? How can I bring it here into my drum circle at the Great Lakes Taiko Center, right? And that's where, again, all these things are intersecting, interconnected, and the power that is generously shared by people. One day, one day I can point to, I was in a learning circle about participatory budgeting, hosted by, I think, the Open Collective Foundation. And the folks were explaining how, and this is something I was interested in, how can we at the Taiko Center, we who are looking at our financial budget, put the decision making in the hands of all our members that are impacted by how we plan our budget. And somebody in the chat was like, oh, this sounds like something perfect for sociocracy or whatever. And people were responding something like, oh yeah. I'm like, what was that? So that is the other thing that, like, you know, I geek out about is like when people are putting, like you all are putting links in the chat of like resources, information, you know, power, knowledge. What are people doing? So then I looked it up afterwards, and that's where, yeah, I've come right now. That is something I'm leaning into. um that Again, practicing, or even just scratching the surface of opening up the possibilities, but sociocracy as a an approach, a method of governance, meaning like, how do we work together? Here we want to do something. In our case at the Taiko Center is great, is sharing the joy of taiko. That's what it's been from the beginning. Like, what does that mean, right? And how do we do it? And that's where I was like, okay, this is, for me, I was like, this is one way for us to restructure from the, you know, conventional business model of top down, and even in nonprofit yeah, models, you know, there can often be, it's like there's there's a governing board, or you know, the sole proprietor has the final word. And like, this is, oh, this is so the sociocracy, or a more democratic structure of how we decide, really resonated with me literally, in terms of like, oh yeah, we are the Taiko Center. At the center is our taiko. At the center is our joy that we are holding, and how we make decisions about how we're going to do the things we need to do, how we're going to distribute what we need to do in order to play together, really makes sense to reform together, as teams or as circles, you know, like the addressing what we're doing in our performance and supporting artists, as working and playing people. What are we doing in terms of each of us being students and teachers, and providing opportunities in the community? How can we, you know, who are we trying to reach? Like, these are all important circles that that make up our intentions, our processes, right? So that's how I come to
Right.
so that's why I'm saying, like, you know, I'm sharing with my members. We have a monthly membership meeting. Like, you know, look at this. Let's do this. And really, again, I need to stress that this is not this is not me trying to do all this stuff on my own, or from ideas that I gather. But I'd like to think of it as, yeah, this is what's happening because I am discovering, you know, what is important to me, what I think I can open up to try to imagine, and that includes conflict and questions, which, you know, I have all the fear and yeah, that all the tension about like, how's this gonna happen, or like, but that's part of the practice, right? To, for me, is to come back to like, okay, you know, I just need to remember, like, that the love is here. That what I'm here to do is to play play with everyone. How can I do that, you know? And as coming back again to one of those solidarity economy principles that have been named, and that is that conflict to receive, or I might not have the exact words that were presented, but to not avoid conflict, but to realize that conflict, and this comes in sociocracy principles too, that conflict is actually generative.
Yeah.
Conflict is clarifying.
Mm.
Conflict is us bringing in what we need. We need to understand. we need to address this discomfort, right? And
Eileen,
yeah,
this two things that I think are so powerful about what you're offering here. One is I'm noticing this metaphor, you've referenced the circle, and it really is like this beautiful metaphor for also the learning, unlearning, and returning that you've said on a number of occasions, right?
yes.
Yeah, right. And so I I resonate with unlearning the internalization of fear of open conflict indicative of dominant culture values, particularly in the US and North America, right? Like,
Yeah.
and and I love returning to matrilineal and collectivist cultures where, you know, this idea of like our wellness being tied to the collective. And so needing that collective sort of with us, right, in
Right.
decision making and valuing like the slowing down that I mentioned to receive and to hear from that
Mm,
collective, right? As we're
mm,
designing, and it as a baby abolitionist, you know, one of the principles that sits at the center of my politic is nothing for us without us, right? And so
nothing
you're
for
like
us without us.
embodying that in thinking about and what I love from this liberation praxis is that when we do share leadership with our members, with the folks we're in struggle with people that are in our organizations, regardless of the struggle, we actually create more spaciousness for creativity. When
Mm,
we lean into this generative conflict, I love you saying that conflict is about making space to say what we need, right?
mhm,
This is what I need. I might need more understanding and like welcoming that conflict because that principled struggle helps us to really see each other and to
mhm,
do our best to meet the need. And so today you're like this nuance that you're bringing is opening me up because I think I've seen us quickly move to like shared leadership means co-directors or it means this thing or that thing, right? And it's
yeah,
like
quick, get
it,
that on there. Yes.
right.
um,
Yeah,
yeah, thank you for,
right.
yeah,
And
something
you're
you said, Yodi, about like slowing down. That is something also in this shared leadership, shared um and accountability, slowing down. So again, um Larry and I always we love to, when we're teaching taiko in class. We don't do so much right now, but we used to teach together a lot. But we're like, oh y'all, we're like, we learn so much from, like, we're all students of this
mhm,
art form. We're all students of life. So when we're teaching, we're like, oh, listen to this, right? Like, this, what we're saying about this way of playing taiko that we're trying to share. Oh, that's like in life, right? And
mm,
this, I've come across this in many of my art, music, especially, learning like, oh, the transitions are like the hardest part, right?
mhm,
um but one thing I wanted to bring forward in terms of slowing down is, Larry likes to say in class that, like, okay, um when he finds that when he's trying to play this particular rhythm pattern, and it's especially like complicated or something about it is tripping him up, and he's like trying to play it with everyone, and like it's not working.
Mhm.
Then he's like, what he tends to do, what we tend to do when we get into that situation is like, okay, I need to catch up with everything else that's happening, so speed up and try to play it faster.
Urgency. Mm.
Yeah, urgency, or like, oh, I don't have all the things, I'm not doing all the things, I need to do more.
Scarcity sets in. Yes.
But then he's sharing, but more often than not, he was going too fast. He needed to slow down and play the
Mm.
rhythm, give a little more space in between the beats.
Woo!
You need to slow down. And that way you can feel the groove,
Come on, honey.
feel the
Give a little
tempo,
more
right?
space in between the beats and feel the groove.
Yeah. And
Yes.
when you can feel it, then others who are playing, you're all together.
Child.
You're there
Mm.
together. Otherwise, you're just like making noise on your own. Which is something we want to do sometimes anyways. But if you're wanting to connect, or one way to connect, yeah, is really to slow down. Give ourselves
Mhm.
that space and time. Um
Well,
Can I
Eileen,
say about
also,
that
oh, go
that
for
that there it's such an invitation, Eileen, to slow down. And I'm just going to speak for myself that there is a way in which I have a knowing, here at New, that there are
mm,
things we need to slow down. For example,
mm,
we have some transitions happening, and this week decided we're like constructing the note that we're going to put on our website that says, we're not going to take new clients on for 6 weeks or whatever, right? And I
okay,
could
yeah.
feel this panic in my body, this internal, like this sense of, well, what will happen? And what if we lose? Like, I
Right, yeah.
immediately
Wait, is
dropped
that
into
okay?
scarcity,
Right,
right?
yeah.
Like, and yet, um, it is, in fact, the greatest, the probably the greatest gift that we could give to ourselves. And so I started to construct this note that I want to, I like,
Ooh, yeah.
yeah, that I want to say we're living in like tumultuous times of grief and loss and violence. And the last 3 years have taken a toll on our bodies and our minds and our spirits and relationships. And it
Mm,
is not sustainable to push through this by moving with persistent urgency or
yeah,
overextending our labor. And so
yeah.
we are going to move at a slower pace to make way for more care, more responsiveness, and collective
Mm,
well-being,
mhm,
right?
mhm,
And there will be times where something urgent will come up, but
mhm,
we're fortunate enough to be in a place now to move with ease, and we
mhm.
need some grace and patience with folks.
Absolutely.
I think last year for sure, like we were all trying to be okay and we were not okay.
Mm,
And I
that's
don't,
true.
I mean, in general, I think we're all trying to be,
Right now,
and
we're
the space
yes.
is like, most of us are not okay. But I feel, I can only speak for myself. I feel like I was in this um, like vortex where, you know, we'd all just seen the world come apart around us. And then with lots of unresolved trauma, trying to stand back up whatever normal was.
Right,
And even though we said there would never be a return to what was, we
right.
were under practiced in the construction of what we needed, which is
Mhm,
why what you're offering is so important, because
mhm.
we need the fortitude, we need each other to be
Yes,
reminded that we don't have to return to these harmful and extractive ways,
right.
and that what we are building towards is going to take time, right? But diligence and practice, discipline and integrity.
Yes. And it takes time, but again, the time we are here right now. And
Mm.
again, I go back to like, yes, and yes, the idea of slowing down really is, again, this is from Rev Angel. It's like, can we be still enough to feel ourselves?
Stay there for a second, please.
Yeah. And can we be quiet enough to hear ourselves? So yeah, the space, the feeling like you need to catch up. You know, I can think of like all the things about of speaking of learning and students, like, you know, our children, and the statements of like, oh, they've lost X number of months or years of learning or whatever, and need to catch up, right? But what, like, wait, like for me, it's like, wait, like we were giving ourselves a pause. Our people were pausing, whether they, you know, were doing it on their own, or just came into the situation, but not going to school, you know, every day. Something else was happening, right? And we need to allow ourselves to acknowledge that. Yeah. What is it that we are, if we're in such a hurry to catch up, what are we running from? Right.
Mm-hmm.
So again, reimagining the future is also, or okay, I'm going to take, again, I'm what new is saying, we're here centering justice. That's our underlying beat, right? Centering justice. That's our grounded rhythm. And what is our song? We are transforming the future
Together.
together.
Well,
But there is a comma. It's not like we're transforming the future together now. Like, how are we going to do that? You know, we are
yeah.
transforming the future together, right? What does transforming mean? How are, the future is here now, transforming, remembering the future, relating to the future, creating the future. And here we are in our circle together, right? Here we are coming in as we are. Like, who are you? How are you in this moment? Because this moment is our future.
That is a wonderful place to pause, I think. Eileen, you know, because you're here all the time, that this chapter season of Centering Justice, we also are trying to invite the community that's in practice with us into the dialogue. So we like to think of this as sort of like a time for communal conversation. And if folks came kind of hungry for something, we want them to be nourished. And if they need a little more, a second helping, this is the time to ask for that. So we invite questions, comments, deepening in this conversation, either in chat, or you can come off of mute. We just ask that you're attentive to the amount of time you take, just so we have room. And then we're learning to wait about 10 seconds of quiet to help you have the space to raise your hand and to decide if you have a question. So while we're giving you a little time to think about what you might want to know from Eileen or from this conversation, Carly is going to drop a link to the feedback form that we like. We want to hear what resonated for you today, and We want to continue to curate our dialogues, centering justice, the topics with you. So please take time, all 17 of y'all, to fill those out. We usually get about 6 or 7. I'd love to have 17 today. So just take a pause to hear what resonated, or what questions or what comments you might have. And again, you can use chat or you can come off mute. Eileen, I will say there were just so many jewels you dropped when it was suggested that we invite you as a speaker. I think it was because there is a way that you have shown up in this space that is like looking back at ourselves. I don't know if you know this, but there are times where we're experimenting with a topic or a thought or an idea or a notion, and you have this wholehearted yes for us, whether it's your presence or your comments in the chat that Hamida mentioned. I want to publicly thank you for resource generation, for our vision. I heard today from our team that you're pulling together like a peer-to-peer resource mobilization for news work. And I feel so seen, Eileen, by you. We're trying to transform our physical space into a space like this. And it's going to take many coins to do that. And appreciate that folks like you see value in that vision that we have. It's a big vision, but like you said, the future is here now. I wonder if you have any final thoughts or reflections, Hamida, and then obviously Eileen as well.
So, I mean, thank you for that invite, EOD. There were times when I wanted to jump in, but I was like, oh my God, there's so much good stuff going on. So, Eileen, as you were sharing a little bit earlier around like the story around Larry and what it meant to speed up or slow down, there was one piece where you talked about like, or you could just be making noise on your own. And sort of what struck me is that you were like, also like, that's fine. But there was a piece where I was holding, so what it means to not make noise on one's own, but to think about what it moves to move in harmonious or make music in harmonious ways with others. And I will say, I have a new friend, y'all. I'm super excited. I'm 38. It's hard to make friends at this age. Jackie from MCR, Michigan Community Resources. And we were talking about like what it means to like really align. And she dropped this thought saying that sometimes you can seem really close to people, but you might be a degree or two off. And when you start traveling, you might be real next to each other, but say 100 miles, 150 miles out, all of a sudden you find yourselves at different ports and you're not quite where you thought you were going to go. So, you know, Eileen, I guess I'm curious if you can offer any insights into like how we can think about the ways that we make music together and like share the melody of our communal leadership in ways that aren't carbon copies, are exactly the same, but might also take us in a similar direction. So we could kind of hang out at the same concert venue, right? Hang out at the same class.
Ooh, thank you, Hamida. So yeah, how do we make noise together? For me, it's like I always think of it as how do we play together? What are we doing, right? And then for each of us, I was thinking about this the other day in terms of the music or the movements that I personally create as an artist, like, okay, or poetry or whatever, it's like I can put it out into the world, and people, y'all receive it, and I need to understand like that how it's received is one thing, but how I put it out is its own thing, right? And in terms of it's funny, Yodi, that you were thinking about. I think it was a couple years ago when I was in a new space online and presenting some of my drumming. In fact, about a song that we're gonna play a video of at the end here. um, and actually, I wasn't playing on any drums at that time. I was talking through it. I was moving through it, and when I was just in my class, which I call taiko play on Sunday, um, and we had put the drums in a circle, but spaced differently. Like some were close together and some were farther apart. And my idea was like people are gonna go through and like, walk around the circle and play on the drums as they go by. And so this is totally like we were playing around with what can we do with each other, right? How can we make something that means that we are connecting? And it doesn't have to be doesn't have to be what we usually do. It's like, be sure you're evenly spaced, your beats are on tempo, that you're that you have a rhythm pattern that is four numbers or in sets of 4 or 8. It doesn't have to be the way you have learned or been trained or been shaped to do. And in fact, during the pandemic, when I was at home with more time on my hands to do some like tinkering around with like electronic music and things like that, and I was like, okay, yeah, I can like make this music, which the track that you heard, if you heard coming in, was made on my iPad in GarageBand. But I learned something through that process, and that is like, okay, like electronically, digitally, I can like play the perfect in time perfectly, and then there are all these like programs to make your music sound more human by moving the beat a little off tempo, because if it was right on, it would just sound like you're just playing a metronome. And I'm like, wait, what? Like, and that changed the way I approach like sharing, like, okay, teaching taiko, like, okay, this is how you can play taiko. Like, it made me think like, wait, I don't need to be like, okay, be sure like our goal is to sound like a metronome, right?
Right.
That was the old way of my thinking, before I realized like, wait, we are human. And like you said, I mean, like, we have different needs. We move in different ways, even when we're moving together. And that is what we need to allow. We need to gift each other
It's so
and receive
leaderful.
the beauty
Yeah,
of that, right?
it's
Yes.
so leaderful. Eileen, tee up this video that you're going to show us. And again, I think I speak for all of us here. This has been a really powerful conversation. Thank you for saying yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
And tell us just briefly about
Yeah,
the video.
just briefly about this. This is
Yeah.
about this video is put together mostly from our connection during the pandemic. And it's the song Mushiokuri, which means send away bugs. And it's our first song we might learn at the Taiko Center. It's the last song we might play at any given presentation, like today, because it's about sending away bugs, sending away things we don't want, letting go of all that, welcoming in abundance, health, fortune, good spirits.
Ashe,
So let's go. Let's
ashe.
Mushio Kuri.
Let's Mushio Kuri.